Absences. That gets us down to item E. It's the Camarillo Transit Vehicles. Mr. Klutzel, is that you again?
Yes. Okay. 2 more to go. This item is to consider authorization of a purchase order to AZ Bus Sales to purchase 2 Camarillo area transit vehicles. Each year, the city programs the purchase of needed replacement transit vehicles through the Ventura County Transportation Commission program of projects. The purchase cost for these vehicles is approved by the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, for 80% reimbursement in FTA funds that the city receives on a reimbursement basis. The next scheduled purchase is for 1 minivan and 1 cutaway shuttle bus, which will replace vehicles that are scheduled to be retired and removed from the fleet. These vehicles include a 4-passenger Braun Entervan minivan at a cost of almost $51,000. And that van can accommodate 1 wheelchair passenger and 3 ambulatory passengers in a variety of configurations of seating. The other vehicle is an ARBOC SOM 16-passenger cutaway shuttle bus at a cost of just under $164,000. So a total cost of right around $215,000, and of that 80%, or $172,000, will be reimbursed through FTA funds, and $43,000 or 20% would come from the general fund as budgeted. And that concludes my report, and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on this? Susan? Centangelo?
We received a comment or a suggestion to, instead of buying the large shuttle bus, to buy 3 additional, the smaller ones, with the idea being that the dial-a-ride is more desired. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the fact, well, it would be much more expensive to operate that many more dial-rides in comparison to having both vehicles.
Correct. Our mixture of vehicles in the fleet is designed around achieving the optimum rides per hour, essentially. And the more you can combine, the better. And then each additional vehicle that you add, not only is it additional capital cost, typically if it's roughly 3 times would be about the same capital cost, but then you've got an additional, it'd be 2 or 3 additional vehicles for maintenance. So that's all considered in our matrix of deciding what mix of vehicles to use. And again, with the whole purpose of achieving the most optimum rides per hour. And we feel that shuttle bus is still needed in the mix of fleet vehicles.
And so the decisions on how we run the transit in Camarillo and what vehicles we buy are based on the studies and what we know about the riders per hour?
Correct.
Right? So they're not just, they're based on data?
Yes, and actually it's pretty detailed and partly a requirement to receive these FDA funding. The tracking of that data and reporting of that data, and so we have that at hand to use to build this ideal matrix of vehicles that we need.
John, anything additional, Shay?
Dave, so the Braun Intervan and the ARBOC SOM, these are each being, we'd purchased each of these in order to replace the equivalent vehicle. Is that right?
Correct.
Is that what we're proposing?
Correct.
And what is the lifespan or the anticipated lifespan of these?
These exact vehicles that we're retiring, I'm not sure the exact lifespan, but it's typically between 5 and 7 years is the lifespan.
And do you know approximately how many miles each of these we charge up each of these vehicles on either a monthly or annual basis?
I don't have that detailed information.
Okay. It is a very pointed question, or a very specific question as well, but I've seen the ridership numbers. What I don't understand is, of the riders that we service per day, or even per hour, I don't know how that corresponds to the number of vehicles we have out and what the occupancy of those respective vehicles are. So it's to say, maybe we're doing 30 riders a day. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical. If we're doing 30 riders a day, but we have that's shared between 2 ARBOC SOMs and a Intervan, and it's kind of evenly spread out throughout the day, then we don't have a large we have a high vacancy, say, in each of those respective vehicles, because neither of them is overpopulated. Do we get in a situation to where the ARBOC SOM, where it's more than half full at any given point during a route or a day?
As far as specific numbers on that, on if that ever happens where it's more than half full, I mean, I would venture to say that it does occur. It's very dynamic. That there isn't necessarily a real consistent pattern on daily ridership. The dial-a-ride services are a appointment-based, reserve a day ahead type of thing, and we've got no-shows that come into play there. So it's the one thing I will say is that we are only charged for vehicle hour that's on the road serving passengers. So if there's not an empty bus driving around waiting for a call.
Right.
If there's somebody to serve, then the shuttle bus or the van will be out either going to pick up or taking the person to their destination. So except for the fixed route, there may be times when there's very few people on that, but the other vehicles, especially for our dial-a-ride, are only out there serving passengers when there's rides to be had. Our contract with our operator also has standard performance standards of rides per hour. And so, and when we've been able to meet that, I believe it's four rides per hour, and then it's up to them to schedule and decide which vehicles to use. Again, to maximize the efficiency of ride times and decrease wait times. So that's really their responsibility to decide how many vehicles they're going to have out at any one time.
What does our fleet consist of right now? Not counting these two proposed new ones, but
Yeah.
just,
I don't have those exact numbers for you either right now.
do you know approximately of our fleet, if it is, say, 9 or 10 vehicles, how many we're using at any one point in time? Like how many we may actually have dispatched simultaneously throughout any given day?
Right. Again, it's going to vary.
Right.
So, I mean, we have a fixed route that's out there doing that route all the time, and then there's likely 2 or 3 other vehicles out at any one given point in time, or maybe more if the ridership demand is there. Again, with the dial-a-ride being call up, make an appointment, that can vary widely throughout the day and throughout the week.
I know my anecdotal experience is many times I do see the large cat buses, or I call the dial-a-ride buses. Those are the ARBOC vehicles. And I usually only see like one. It's hard to see in, but I usually only see like one person. I don't usually see a large contingency of individuals riding those at any one time. And I'm not quite, I'm really interested in the utilization of the vehicles of our current fleet as well. I would assume that, if it was, if we needed to be more agile and be in more places simultaneously, that utilizing cheaper, smaller Braun vans would be a greater utilization than one large ARBOC if, unless we have a large pickup. I don't know if we need to pick up 7 people at once or something like that.
Well, depending on how the rides get scheduled, there could be 7 people that have scheduled rides that the operator decides to again, for efficiency of number of rides per hour, combine those 7 people into that shuttle bus and the cutaway bus and utilize that, even if they're not going to the exact same place. But routing the rides accordingly to get as many people on the bus as possible at any given time. You get a few people in a minivan, and if one's a wheelchair, you're limited to the total number you can accommodate there. So it's really, this mix of vehicles is to give as much flexibility and efficiency as possible based on our ridership and our numbers.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it for questions.
Yeah, I have just a couple questions, Dave. These vehicles are approved by the feds that actually come. They aren't approved vehicles.
Yes, they have to be.
Yeah, they have to be so we can get the reimbursement, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And has there ever been any talk about maybe cleaner burning fuels? I know you see like natural gas, and of course we have been monitoring the electrical cars, but there's some thinking And I know this has got to be part of the dialogue we have, obviously, with the feds on this too, but is there some thinking about in the future about more cleaner burning vehicles?
Right, and you see that out there in the industry. That is, combi, your larger buses that are used by other agencies typically are compressed natural gas. And for us, our fleet size, our vehicle size, for a cost basis, it doesn't pan out at this point to incorporate that. And then also there's fueling. You've got to be able to be set up to fuel those types of vehicles. I know some of the other cities have the higher speed, higher volume refueling for the alternate fuels, electrical included. So that is something that's on the radar and we're aware of.
We'll continue to monitor that as that progresses. And,
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions?
Just have one comment.
Sure.
Is it
Please
appropriate to do
proceed.
it now? Okay. My greatest concern, and this was kind of brought up during the budgetary sessions that we held, is that one of our high rising cost segments in our budget is transportation. And it was recognized that at some point we do need to do kind of a top-down, left and right evaluation of our public transportation and whether we need to change our approach. My greatest concern right now with making authorizing a capital outlay of over $200,000 is if we as the council decide that we want to shift our priorities and or shift how we approach public transportation within our city, and whether or not and or how we approach public transportation in terms of adjacent communities and or transportation organizations or whatnot. And there's a lot to talk there and unpack, and I don't want to delve into it. My biggest concern is that we're making a decision to make a large capital purchase when knowing that we need to really reevaluate how we approach this particular segment. I'm not necessarily opposed to, if it works out, and that's, if the numbers work out and this is what we want to do, then I have no issue with authorizing this, somewhere down the line. But making in my book, $200,000, I know the whole scheme of things in a budget is not necessarily a lot of money. For me, it's quite a bit of money. But making a large capital outlay, knowing that we need to have that broader discussion as to how we approach this particular issue in the rising costs. I'm just particularly not comfortable with that. I actually have one follow-up question to Dave. And I'm wondering, what is the actual state of the two vehicles that we're looking to replace? Do we need to replace them because they're literally falling apart, or do you think they have, albeit with probably heightened maintenance requirements, do they have still a somewhat valid lifespan of a few months? As far as a month or two goes, they could. This is really on our look-ahead schedule of lifespan and the need to, replace vehicles that are aging out, essentially, that need to be retired. So we're following that schedule. I couldn't give you an answer down to the months on how much longer these vehicles could go. But we're, and this is planning ahead where the delivery of these vehicles actually, it takes nearly a year to get delivered, believe it or not, by the time we issue a purchase order, to get that order in and to take delivery of them. It does take some time to get that. So, we do need to plan ahead. Mm-hmm. So it's largely on a planned, scheduled basis on typical lifespan, years of service. So that's where we've brought this forward now with that need. So the replacement for these vehicles is based on, it's more based on a schedule, just a predetermined schedule of rotation of vehicles, put out to pasture the aging vehicles and bring the new ones in, more than, say, immediate need and or maintenance, the maintenance those are undergoing or requiring?
It's pretty standard in the industry to have a good guess on how long these vehicles in terms of years can operate, especially knowing your system, knowing our particular system and that kind of thing. And so then again, planning ahead. Now, like I said, exact day that we're going to take delivery of these may vary a month or two. Right, so those existing vehicles would need to go another month or two. So that's kind of allowed for in the timing of this.
Okay.
Any further discussion? I might add, too, that I think it's also important, and I do agree that we will have to have a discussion. The transportation dollars are rising, and I think they're going to continue to do it. But I also think it's important to remember that it's a federal grant, and my understanding is there's certain criteria within the grant that you have to follow, too, and somewhat 80% of this is going to be reimbursed by that grant. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so there's certain criteria that we don't write the criteria, but if you want to partake in it, you do have to follow those certain criteria that is out there as well. But absolutely, we'll be having further discussions on this in the future.
If I could mention, we are actively actually diving deeper into and assessing the overall transit services and costs, as was mentioned in the budget process that will be eventually coming back to council. We're, collectively as staff taking a look at all of that closely.
Do we have a timetable as to approximately when that might come back to council?
Not exactly at this time. I don't know. City manager may have a better idea.
Well, it's definitely something that we hope to bring back before the end of the year,
Okay.
and possibly in the late fall.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion? Motions in order, please?
I will move that we authorize the issuance of a purchase order to AZ Bus Sales for the purchase of 2 transit vehicles in an amount not to exceed $214,729.78.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Okay, that passes.
Well, I need to interject something here. I'm going to need to check to see whether or not a 2-to-1 vote is sufficient on this item. So rather than to announce whether the motion is passed or not, I'll request that perhaps we put the item over until the 7:30 session during the break. I'm going to check the code to see what it says about when you're spending money, if you can do this on a 2-to-1 vote or not.
Okay, yeah, I think that's reasonable. Okay, so we'll table this one at this particular point. Let's